Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Club 303 podcast, continuing our breakdown of the divisions one by one. We've done the NL West, we've done the NL Central. Time to wrap up the National League with the NL East. Probably going to be a lot of hate in this video, in this podcast, for multiple different reasons. We'll get to it throughout. First of all, how the boys doing?
Doing good. It's nice to have a midday talk with baseball. A little bit different since our last sessions, usually late at night. So it'll be a different pace, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm much more tired.
So I'm doing great. Got Sun Devils 3-0 on the weekend in baseball. Overall, just college baseball starting was a fantastic time. I really did not do anything yesterday except for drink beer and watch college baseball, and it was an amazing time. And the Sun Devils 3-0.
Yeah, I have been useless for 3 days now.
And it's been absolutely amazing. So I'm in a very good mood for today's episode.
It's baseball.
A lot of good college sports on here the past couple days. A lot of, like I was telling y'all in the group chat the other day, this is one of my favorite times of year where college baseball is just getting, revved up, and college basketball is getting tournament ready. So it's a good time of year to be a college sports fan.
Shout out college softball too. Might have to say that because Oklahoma State's good at it.
Okay.
All right, so we can start with our NL East breakdown, and we'll start positive and get more negative as we go along. So we'll start with a team like the Atlanta Braves, who are just solid all the time, literally since before any of us were born. They're just solid, and I think that's going to be the same this year.
I guess, yeah, so I'll start. This lineup is pretty much the same way it's always been. They've taken advantage of just having team-friendly contracts up and down this lineup. I think the main one is Ronald Acuna on his ridiculous long-term deal, Ozzy Albies, and just these cornerstone guys. Austin Riley's another one. Matt Olson they got from the A's for literally nothing. But this is a very, very good lineup. They're getting Acuna back. He should be playing, I think, pretty much almost, they're hoping, I think, since opening day. And then right behind him, early on in the season, they'll get Spencer Strider back, which is someone they really need. I think the main weakness I see personally in this team is that the rotation does need a guy like Spencer Strider to come back and get back to where he was in that Cy Young candidacy. Because while you have Chris Sale, and he's coming off his amazing year, we know Chris Sale at this age is
old,
bound to pop up with something. So
I've been seeing him just keep popping up on all these top 10 lists, and I get it, the season he had last year. But are we just really assuming that he's just going to do that again at this age when, like, for the previous 5 years, he had nothing but injuries and disappointment? He's one of the greats of our generation, and he had another great season last year. But my hot take is he's probably going to be hot garbage this year. I just think that's how it's going to end up.
yeah, I think if Sale's healthy, he's going to be good. Was last year the anomaly of him actually staying healthy for the most part? I feel like if you're betting that was the anomaly, you're probably right, to be honest. I'm not rooting for Chris Sale to be hurt. It's obviously fun to watch him pitch. It's fun to see a good Braves team, in my opinion. But I would not bet on him to stay healthy, to be honest.
Yeah, and the Braves team, looking at the 20s so far, they have been a good team throughout the early 20s. During the offseason, they lost Max Fried and A.J. Minter, so you are putting a lot on Spencer Strider's shoulders as he returns. And so I guess that's my biggest concern with the team is just the gaps that Spencer Strider has to fill with the starting rotation in as many innings as he can eat up.
Yeah, I mean, the Braves to me are like a weird second favorite team. For growing up on TBS on Sundays, it was the Braves. That's just what you were going to come home and watch. This year, I think, coming off of a pretty good season last year, which for the Braves, maybe actually a subpar season for what they've been having here in the past couple of years. Ozuna from the Braves going 302, 39 home runs. He had like a 550 slugging. They have Austin Riley, who I think is one of the better defensive players, young guys at least, in baseball right now. He went 256, 19 home runs last year. And then kind of like you guys were mentioning, like they still have what's left of Chris Sale. He went 18-3 last year, and maybe he can stay healthy for a little bit this year and give Spencer Strider a little bit of that push underneath to kind of make room for the kids, I guess. Last year, they had, out of the teams that made the postseason, the Braves actually had the worst batting average with runners in scoring positions of any team to get in the postseason. So I think that's something they're going to need to figure out. And, like I said, they're putting a lot of pressure on their younger guys now, sending, Fried to the pinstripes and clearing out a lot of that room for Strider to kind of take over. I think they're going to win their division. I think this is my personal pick to win here. I think all around they are probably, we'll get into, a couple other contenders later, but for right now, I think they are probably going to be the team we see come away with this one. I think Matt Olson is really going to be your guy to watch this year in terms of, getting the firepower that they're going to need to kind of push over the hump and maybe go a little further than they were able to last year. But I still think this is a good team. This is a very competitive Braves team, kind of what we're used to seeing, as, kind of like you guys were saying in the 20s. They've been on this kind of, run like we saw, when we were kids. With the teams that they were fielding. And so it's a weird kind of nostalgic feeling. The Braves are a dominant force again. And it's fun to watch. The Braves are always fun baseball. It's always electric. They always put these young teams out on the field who every year they're a problem in the postseason. Last year, I think they just kind of came up short. Maybe they didn't have the tools in the right spots. But yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be another really successful year for the Braves. And in a lot of ways, it's just going to kind of be business as usual.
I think, like, the other thing, I completely agree with Austin there. I think this team is the best team in the division because of that lineup. Literally, the only hole they pretty much have is at shortstop. They have Arcia, who, who isn't bad. It just, in comparison to the rest of the Braves lineup, isn't just a certified hitter.
Yeah, that's like when you look at your lineup and you're like, yeah, our one hole is like Orlando Arcia isn't a superstar like the other 8 guys.
Exactly.
Probably in a good spot.
But another thing I want to rant on, it feels like a lot of people have just forgotten how good Ronald Acuna is. That this guy, when healthy, is a top 5 player in baseball. In my opinion, top 3. I mean, people forget, his last full season. He won the MVP. But not only did he do that, he hit 41 home runs and stole 73 bases. And just plays... In the outfield, sometimes he can take wonky routes and make weird plays, but he is a good defender out there too, to where he is the definition of a superstar talent, and they are getting that back, hopefully, for a full season that they didn't have last year. I think you really saw that with the Braves. In part reason, again, they made the playoffs, and yeah, they lost first round, but, as a Mariners fan, to me, that'd be, lifelong dream, almost, at that point, but... For their standards, it was definitely a fallback, and it mainly comes down to Strider and Acuna weren't there, but if they're there, I mean, they're going to be right back into it.
I think really the craziest breakdown of it is last year they won 89 games and finished second in this incredibly stacked division. Ozzie Albies played less than 100 games. Acuna only played less than 50. Strider only pitched in 2. Those are Murphy only played in 72 games. Those are literally the key pieces of their roster. Didn't have them for most of the year. They still won 89 games. Insane.
Exactly.
Yeah, and especially with the leadership of Ozuna, I really wasn't expecting him to have as big of a year as he did last year. I was kind of expecting him to start to decline as he gets older. So kind of curious if he keeps that same battle going into 2025, seeing if he is still a legit player and a leader for this Braves team.
Couldn't have happened to a worse guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this team is really poised to get to where they have been, in the past couple of years, especially since their World Series runs are still pretty recent. I think they have the tools that they need to get there, and kind of what you guys were mentioning, they won a really standout amount of games with some of their best players not being able to contribute to their fullest extent. So, and this is the story. I mean, it's the curse of baseball. If your lineup stays healthy, then they could give the Dodgers a run for their money on this side. And that's going to be a really exciting series to watch in a couple months from now. And that's one of my favorite things about the season getting, started up is assuming that baseball works out in the way everybody wants it to, and your whole lineup, top to bottom, stays perfectly healthy all through the season. It won't. But if that's going to be the case for them, even with a couple pieces being out like they had last year, I still think this is going to be a team that LA is really going to have to start watching early and start being ready to compete with once we get kind of in the backstretch. The Braves, honestly, in a couple of ways, started to kind of trend downwards pretty heavily there towards the end of last season. So I'm interested to see if they can really get over that hump and kind of get out of the post All-Star break blues that they seem to have, and really hit the ball well going into the back stretch of the season. But yeah, I mean, I think this could easily be a World Series contending team on paper right now.
100%.
Well, now we can move on to another team that a lot of people like to love. I don't. I hate them, but that's for personal reasons because they knocked the Cardinals out of the playoffs a couple years ago. When I was in attendance, it was Yadier Molina and Albert Pujols' last game. I had some Phillies fans sitting in front of me. They were very rude, as you would expect from people from Philadelphia, and that's okay. It's the Philadelphia Phillies, maybe the best pitching rotation in all of baseball, certainly near the top, not just the starting rotation, the bullpen too. And they got some bats in that lineup that are big names. They're going to be right there up there with the Braves this year, I think.
Yeah, I think when looking at the Phillies, the main thing that jumps out to me, obviously there's a lot to talk about with the lineup, but the main thing is the pitching staff that has gone even better. It is easy to me like a top 3 rotation in baseball. I mean, when you have headlines, you have Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, and then you have Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez, and Jesus Luzardo joining that rotation. I mean, it is just top to bottom really, really good. And then they have a great lineup. Obviously, they have Harper, they have Trey Turner, they have Schwarber still there. They added Kepler. That was kind of, in my opinion, besides Luzardo, their main addition to this team, partially because he's a good defender. He has a pretty good bat. We kind of Phillies' weaknesses, I feel like the past couple of years have been that they've just been god awful at outfield defense. Kepler will definitely help with that. They still have Castellanos out there. I'll jump in on Castellanos real quick. I think Castellanos, I didn't have him as my pack your bags, but he definitely was a candidate for it. He's a terrible defender at this point, and the bat is still pretty good, but it's only just like above average at this point. And he quite literally is like in the top 1% of just god awful defenders. He really does nothing but hit, and it's just above average at this point. And that's why, again, he played 162 games for this team last year, and he only had .8 WAR because of how bad that defense was.
Yeah, it's a tough situation when you've got 2 of those players. I'm talking about Kyle Schwarber. And, at least Kyle Schwarber walks, too. He doesn't just hit. He gives you a good at bat, too. So, it's definitely a tough situation. I, in a similar fashion, almost picked Max Kepler for my stay hot player. I didn't, but I think that was a really sneaky good pickup for them.
It really was. It was the perfect addition for him, to where I think this Phillies team is really, I think, in a better spot than I think there's a lot of things they wanted to get better at that they did. I think the Phillies actually had slower offseason than they probably wanted. I think they wanted to upgrade at third base from Alec Boehm, but they didn't get the chance to. We'll see. I mean, there's still time there, still in spring training, but I think they wanted to upgrade there and they didn't. And probably the same thing with they probably would have rather had one more outfielder.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of the tools, and like you said, I mean, the rotation is incredible, and especially coming off the season that Zach Wheeler had, going 16 and 7, 2.57 ERA with almost 230 strikeouts on the season. I mean, that was he was fun to watch start to finish last year. However, I think an issue that they are going to run into is in their bullpen. They had the 14th best ERA in baseball in bullpen wise, and they really didn't have an option for closer. I didn't feel like they tried Estevez, and then he went like for 2.57 after coming in kind of late in the season and really kind of being a nobody, honestly. And then they just haven't really done anything in the offseason. And I expected a little more, especially since they've been getting close for the past 5 or 6 years. And now they're just kind of losing a lot of that steam, which is a little worrying. They still have Trey Turner. I mean, like you guys mentioned, 295, 21 homers, 25 doubles, 469 slugging. Bryce Harper is still Bryce Harper, hit 30 bombs last year. They tried to fix their like outfield struggles with Rojas and Marsh. That just didn't work. Marsh hit like 249 with 16 homers and just wasn't really that good defensively. And then Rojas was kind of a last minute, like, I guess we'll try it. And he hit for 200 and like 5 at bats. I just am worried that they're hitting a lull and that the Phillies are about to start trending way down. If they don't start making moves, they kind of wasted the offseason. And I'm not saying it's over. I'm not saying that there's not still moves that they could make, but the best players that would have been the ticket for them to compete a lot more with the Braves and a lot like they have in past years is gone. I mean, a lot of the players that they needed are no longer on the table, and they still have these holes to fill that are just glaring sore thumbs. I think you can't really ride your starting rotation like a lot of people think they will, in my opinion. I think they are going to have to kind of up the ante in the bullpen if they want to compete. And then hitting, they're fine. They just have to figure it out defensively. This isn't the Phillies teams we're used to seeing in the past couple of years. And I personally do not like the Phillies and haven't ever really cared for them, especially, 08-09 World Series was both against the Phillies played in both of those. So fuck them, honestly. But, I mean, I just feel like there's still so many holes that they need to fill, and they're just not, because they have a lazy front office and they always will,
Yeah. The Phillies are interesting to me. They're a team that I would want to dislike, especially because their fan base, like you said, machine. Phillies fans are like just Philadelphia fans in general, no matter what sport, just terrible people.
They're bad human beings.
Yeah, but I mean, I've always been a Bryce Harper guy. He's one of the players of our generation. One of my best buds, Drazi, who you guys all met out in California, who came to visit. He's a big Phillies fan, so shout out Drazi.
May or may not stirred the pot on your firing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do pay attention to this team a lot come playoff time. Citizens Bank Park is just absolutely electric in the postseason, and so that is pretty cool to watch. I think during the offseason, adding Luzardo was huge to address, that depth concern. When you look at the key players of the Phillies in this lineup, the core is starting to age, and so that's kind of my biggest concern. But this team is still a powerhouse, but I think at best they have a shot of making the wild card, especially with the Braves and the Mets on the rise.
Wild card's reasonable. I'll agree with that and say that this is a wild card team.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I think Pat also does have a great point that when you look at this team, you do look at the age that a lot of these guys are. I think we pretty much all agree that when we look at this line, pretty much all these players are probably past their prime. They're not going to. I'd be surprised if any of these guys had like the best season of their career, and part of the reason is because the bar set's so high for most of them. But yeah, like a lot of them are not going to come out and just like have the best year of their career. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was what like Austin was saying with the bullpen. Yeah, they really just didn't address it when they lost these guys like Estevez that they picked up at the trade deadline. They went and got Jordan Romano, who has a track record of really really great success with the Blue Jays. But he was just god awful last year. There's a reason that the Phillies were able to get him so easily, and it's because he was just so bad last year. And they're hoping they can have him find it again. And if he does, then it's a great bullpen addition. But if Romano doesn't work out, the back end of the bullpen really starts to have some holes for a team that should be going for it as much as the Phillies are.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to step up. Like, between Kirkering, Romano, Alvarado, and Strom, one of those four is going to have to, like, be lights out.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because like Strom is a good reliever, but I think he's a guy you'd rather have in like sixth, seventh.
Yeah.
Like I don't think you want or in like
Then,
you
like-
pick and choose what batters you want him to face.
And
So I
also-
mean, who are you looking at? And if the game's close, I mean, who is their most sure shot at putting in to get out of a late game tough situation?
like,
I think they really are. I think they really are hoping Romano bounces
Yeah,
back
I
and
mean-
is that guy.
because he's been that in the past. But I mean, Alvarado has nasty stuff, but he just gets wild sometimes, and you can't. It's hard to trust that in the ninth inning because sometimes he'll just come in and he's not going to throw a strike. Like he just has those days. So yeah, I mean, I think they're putting a lot of chips in Jordan Romano, which guys can have bounce back years.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. I'm not even saying like it's a bad idea of them.
Probably just shouldn't have been the only one.
Yeah, it really should have been like for the Phillies. It should have been like, oh, if Jordan Romano bounces back, we might have like the best bullpen in baseball. Like that should have been kind of like their goal. But now it just seems like, oh, if Jordan Romano bounces back, we'll have a good bullpen.
All right, so we've talked positively a little bit about the Braves and the Phillies. Up now, a team that I think we all love to hate, the New York Mets. Now, they're probably going to be a good team, but that doesn't mean we have to be positive about them. Stokes, the Yankees fan, probably hates them more than anybody else here. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I just want to start by saying fuck the Mets. And I'm going to say that a lot this season, and I'm going to mean it a lot this season. And I don't care how good they are. It really doesn't matter. Fuck the Mets until I die. They have the fucking $765 million man, 41 bombs, 286 last year. They got Lindor. I mean, he himself hit 33 home runs and 500 slugging. They're going to be good. They're trying really hard to compete with the Yankees. At the end of the day, you can't convince me otherwise that their entire front office is not just sick of being the little brother in New York sports like they will be. They will continue to be. I don't care how much money you pay one guy for 30 years. I don't care if you take out a mortgage on him. You're still really trying, and you really want to be the next best team in New York. And if that's your whole mission, go for it. You took a lot of New York players to help you get there with adding Severino, who sucks and who isn't that good and who is going to underperform for your team, just like he did when he was in the other part of New York blowing games in pinstripes and not for your shitty organization. Mania's fine, I guess. They're probably going to win 85 games, and they're going to spend a lot of money, and they're going to spend a lot of money to win 85 games in Mets fashion. They're still the same team. This is still the exact same organization we've seen. They're going to perform well in the early parts of the postseason, and then every ounce of momentum they had will die out because they're a shitty organization ran by a shitty owner. There's just not enough room for another big team in New York. So fuck off. Just kind of in general, they're not going to be better than the Braves. It's going to be the most expensive 80-win season you've ever seen in your life. And then I will, once again next year, tell you that this team's bad and that they suck and they have a couple good players. And as we've seen in baseball, a couple good players can't win you a World Series. You have to buy a whole team of good players. Just ask the other team in New York who tried it, and it didn't fucking work because then you have the fifth inning. And you can't win the fifth inning. You can't buy a fifth inning, as we've seen. Just like that. You can't buy it. You can't buy catching fly balls, apparently, no matter how much money you spend on your captain. So that's all I've got to say. I could go on. I could fill the podcast with shitting on the Mets because I fucking hate that team. And I've never met a Mets fan I like. I've never met a Mets fan who's enjoyable to be around. And I've never met a Mets fan who's right about anything they've ever said. The Mets will not win a World Series in the 20s. They will not win a World Series in the 30s. I hope they never win another World Series. I hope if there was a way for the Mets to never win another game, I'd like to take that option. I don't know. Like they're not the Yankees. They will not be the Yankees. They will continue to be the other team in New York, and that's just kind of the way it's going to be for a long time.
Wow. I think we should just cut the podcast right there.
Yeah, that was a solid 3-minute rant right there. And you kind of, towards the end, you kind of got into a little bit why I hate the Mets. A lot of it is their fans and how delusional and shitty they are. And they just cling to having an owner that likes to spend money, but it hasn't worked for them. So, like, who really gives a damn? I mean, they've had just as much, well, maybe a little bit more postseason success than the Cardinals over the last while, but the Cardinals have a World Series win more recently than they do, and we don't spend money like they do, so I don't really give a damn. The other reason is specifically a fuck you to Pete Alonso. I'll never forget how 5'6", 50-plus-year-old first base coach Stubby Clapp whooped your ass in a benches clearing brawl, took you straight to the ground, and he cried like a little baby bitch in the post press conference, saying that you were a big bad man and you could probably send somebody to the hospital after you got put on your ass by a 5'6", 50-plus-year-old. Eat shit. You then also threw Mason Wynn's first career hit into the fucking stands like a jackass. And it wasn't even like malicious. You're just a dumb, stupid fucking idiot.
He's just a bad person.
He fucking prays to God that he gets to hit in the home run derby and sells his soul for it. You can see him close his eyes and pray to the devil in the cages before he goes out to hit, and then the line drives off of kids' heads in the outfield. And he's just vibing with it too. He doesn't care. I hate him. He's terrible. Well, he's not a terrible player. Unfortunately, he is a good player, or at least a good hitter. But I just really, really, really dislike the man. And I think I could beat him in a fight. I'll say that.
All right. I hope everyone on the probably don't mind the Mets at all, really. I actually do kind of like, I think Steve Cohen, I think is good for baseball. I do like him being in baseball as an owner. I know a lot of others do not feel that way.
I will admit I am also a lot of my hate is jealousy that they have an owner that's willing to spend money.
Yeah,
I'm not jealous of the Mets in any respect.
Well, I think Austin, again, is just... Mets fans are very loud right now, and they have, in my opinion, a right to be, because they, for the first time forever, are knocking on the Yankees' door. And as much as, like, it feels like Yankee fans like Austin are just back to the door, trying to keep it shut, not let them into the party. The fact is, they took your mans. They have Juan Soto on their roster. They have the man that took you guys to the World Series, and one of the best players in baseball. And then, like, Juan Soto pretty much like did kind of carry that Yankees team to where they got last season in the playoffs, and now he's a Met. The Mets, in large part, brought back pretty much the same team. The only guys they lost Severino to the A's, replaced him with Frankie Montas, which is almost like they almost might as well be carbon copies. Yeah, they literally almost are carbon copies of each other. So they replaced him. They lost Jose Iglesias, who's kind of like a vibe guy. But besides that, this is pretty much the same Mets team that had that run. There obviously are still holes. The rotation. I'm going to kick it back to Austin here because I know he'll definitely have something to say about it. The Mets did sign Clay Holmes and plan to use him as a starter.
Which is just the craziest bullshit I have ever heard.
Clay Holmes
it's a bad idea start to finish. Did they watch a game last year when he tried to be a starter? When we tried that, when they said, okay, we do not have another serviceable arm, let's just throw it against the wall and see if Clay Holmes sticks, and he did not. It was a bad idea, and I cannot believe I was besides myself when they said Clay Holmes is a starter. That's a ridiculous move on everybody's part. That's not going to end well.
As like Clay Holmes did come up through the system as as a starter when he's coming up with the Pirates.
And not to cut you off though, but like I would like to know the last time he did get consistent starts in a season, because I recall watching him play in AAA. I watched him pitch in AAA.
Yeah, he was in Indianapolis,
for the Indianapolis Indians several years. I mean, Tyler Glasnow was still in AAA with the Pirates at that time. That's how long it's been. and he was a reliever for the Indianapolis Indians. He was not getting starts anymore at that point. So it's been a minute since
I know I looked it up before. I think the episode, I think he had 20 something for Indianapolis back in 2018. He's only in the major leagues. He's gotten 4 starts, and those are kind of emergency starts for the Pirates in 2018. He has not recorded a single start outside of the 2018 season at the major league level. Um, Again, he had, I think, a good track record. Like he did come up through the system as a starter for the Pirates,
every
but he
pitch.
transitioned to the reliever role. He had some good times as a reliever with the Yankees. He had some very bad times, in particular last year, as a reliever. So I don't think he's going to stick there. There are track records of like reliever to starter projects working out. Like, just last year we saw Seth Lugo really work out for the Royals in that role. But we've also seen it just completely collapse, whether it be like AJ Puck is, I mean, we'll get to the Marlins, but AJ Puck was a Marlins, idea of putting him in the starter role, and he was just god awful at it. So I'm definitely leaning that way with Clay Holmes to start. I don't think it's going to work out.
Yeah. I mean, the Mets have massive expectations this year. And looking at the offseason moves, obviously they had the massive signing of Juan Soto, but no major pitching additions, which if you want this team to compete late in the season, you're really banking on the fact that the pitching holds up. And if it does, they definitely can challenge a team like the Phillies. However, I just don't see that happening. And I do think that they will disappoint with the expectations that they have. And then going back to the signing of Juan Soto of $765 million, that amount is just does not seem real.
It's a shitload of money to win 90 games.
It's
crazy.
I'll never cumulatively have anywhere close to that much in my life. Probably not any of us combined. Although, you two over there, data analytics guys, you're pretty smart. Maybe you'll make $1 million one day.
Yeah, but I mean, realistically, we are not, and we talked about this a little bit in our text group chat. We're not far from seeing a $1 billion deal being done, which is just absolutely crazy to me. But I mean, to shine a little bit of light on the Mets, I think that their offense is a little bit stacked now, especially with Soto. They got Alonso, obviously, just signed to a 2-year deal. I think that was best case scenario for both parties. As well as Lindor and Nimmo. I think that the offense is pretty stacked, in my opinion.
Going back to what you said about the pitching, there are some good players on this pitching staff, but there's not depth. I think that's what stands out to me. Minaya, Senga, they're good at the top. Montes is, I got him in my pack your bags watch later spoiler, but he can be an okay 4. But there's just not depth there because once you get past that, we're talking Clay Holmes, Paul Blackburn, who you could have convinced me retired 7 years ago. And you look at the bullpen.
He's an innings eater.
Yeah, shout out. I don't want to hear about innings eaters. I'm a Cardinals fan. I've had enough of them.
They got a bullpen full of innings eaters.
Yeah, Diaz is Diaz, obviously. Stanix, he's pretty good, but I like the pickup of AJ Minter, but there's not a bridge in this bullpen. If your starter only goes 5 innings, it's going to be tough to get to Minter Diaz, I think.
And I was looking at some of the analytics. I don't know if it was from Fangraphs or Petcoa, but there's not a single starter that's expected to exceed 144 innings, which, you're going to have to rely heavily on the bullpen, which is ultimately a question mark.
Yeah. Now, that being said, the offense is really good. You got Jeff McNeil, who's just going to hit for a high average. Alonso's going to get his homers. Francisco Alvarez is, I think, a rising star as a catcher, a hitting catcher in this league. Mark Vientos, I think the reason that Pete Alonso was out there for so long and the Mets didn't just bring him back immediately is because I think that they were completely okay with letting Mark Vientos play first base every day, and he would have done a good job. That guy can hit. Instead, he'll probably slide over to third base. This lineup's good. It's real good.
Yeah, this lineup, like you said, like I think they wanted Vientos, and I think long term their plan still is to slide Vientos over to first base. He just fits better there. But with the way the Alonso market worked out, it just felt destined that Alonso wanted to be a Met, and the Mets were eventually going to give him the deal he wanted, and that's what happened. Um, I'll jump like with the pitching again. They are like they're hoping that they get the second half of Naya that we saw. Senga is going to be back. Hopefully he stays healthy. He's another guy. If he stays healthy, Kodai Senga is a very good pitcher and very good number two. Um, but again, you're just banking on him staying healthy, which is a question mark. And then, and going off that, then you have Frankie Montas, who has just been plagued by arm injuries, in particular shoulders, which are usually really tough.
I was gonna bring it up later when I talk about him as my pack your bags player, but I just saw something this morning that he's already gonna miss the start of the season.
Yeah,
and they're waiting on one big, like maybe this is it, but one big arm injury for this team in any, like whether it be a starter or in the bullpen, that takes them from the second place team to the third or fourth. I mean, they're just so ready for one injury in their pitching to completely derail their season. And maybe that's a big exaggeration. Maybe their hitting can make up for it, but just the law of averages, one big arm injury, it's kind of wraps on their postseason hopes.
Well, yeah, fortunately for them, their floor in this division is third place. But
I agree.
That is true. But like I actually like as much as I did hype up the Met, I do think there is, because of the things we said with the the arm worries we have with the rotation, and also I think there is just that that mindset of like when you're a team that kind of just like had that late season run all the way to the NLCS, and now going into this year, you've just signed the biggest contract in sports history. The expectations could not be higher. So there's so much more pressure. And then, I mean, we talked about they didn't bring back Jose Iglesias, who, again, as a baseball player, doesn't mean a lot, but he did seem kind of like the life of that team a lot of times during those runs last season. And as of now, he's still a free agent. He could come back, but as of now, he is not on that roster. Whenever I see like a team that the expectations have raised that much and they lose a locker room guy like that, I always get somewhat worried that if things start off slow for the Mets, like who's going to be the guy? Because that's the thing. Like we've shown Pete Alonso. I feel like a lot of people when Pete Alonso opens his mouth, he's so cheesy that he's just a guy you tune out. To be honest.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Lindor is a good captain, but you need other clubhouse guys than just that. I mean, and hey, Soto and Lindor, maybe they can captain the ship. But I think every team's got to have that guy that like doesn't even really play.
One thing to mention about Soto in terms of being like a clubhouse personality leader in a way is that last year for the Yankees, it wasn't necessarily like the electricity and personality of Juan Soto that made the Yankees better. It was the fact that you had these other personalities who were, maybe bigger and better in their own minds than Soto, and now saw that, oh, well, this young kid's going to come in here and play like this, so now we've got to play better. So I don't think Soto didn't so much
of DJ LeMahieu.
It did work for DJ LeMahieu because he was bad and is bad. But I think for a lot of your guys, like, you saw, you actually didn't see the postseason resurgence of Judge because it didn't happen. But like Stanton figuring out how to hit the ball for power every time he comes up to the plate, not just once every couple weeks. I mean, it was really nice. And then you saw that kind of trickle down through the lineup with a lot of your older guys. So, I mean, maybe, Pete Alonso's weird enough and a little, different enough to feed into that, but that is a good point. That's not something I really thought about of who's going to kind of carry the torch of their clubhouse guy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And then I actually do have an interesting question because I think and we're about to close up naturally. We're going to get to like a mid team and then a god awful team next. But so I'll just open this question now. I think we get 3 playoff teams from either this division or the NL West. Like, which division do you think guys will get it?
I think it's more likely that the NL East. I think that just because, right now, if we're looking at the Mets as the third-place team, I think they just have more upside than, say, the Diamondbacks, who I really like, but the Diamondbacks, I think, are more susceptible to a fall off just because they're still kind of young and not as established. But I agree. I think no, two teams are not making it out of the Central. They're just not.
Yeah, no.
So one of these divisions is going to have three. I would lean towards the East right now.
The East is just better baseball on both sides of the coin. I mean, this, in my opinion, is a more evenly stacked division than the West. Like, I just, kind of like Machine was saying, like the Diamondbacks are too young. All of your talent there is really sourced to the Dodgers, and so I think the East has more across the board not flatline, but like just across the board more average talent for every team, and they have more big stars in quantity. And so I think this is going to be where the three teams, and I think, unfortunately, again, fuck the Mets, it'll be the Braves, the Phillies, and the Mets, realistically. I'm not saying they're going to do well in the postseason by literally any stretch of the imagination. So don't read too much into that. But I do think it will be the East. The East in the AL and the NL is just better baseball.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more, Stokes. Yeah, I mean, you said it well. Just it's so much more balanced with the star level, whereas in the West, obviously, you got the stacked Dodgers team. But I mean, it is a good comparison of the West and the East, just because you got those three teams at the top who are it's just competitive. When you look at each of these divisions, you think of these three teams, and so. You got the three teams, and then a mid team, like you said, Slade, and then just an absolute bottom feeder at the bottom of each of those divisions.
What do you think, Slater? You posed the question.
I think it's really the main thing. I think when I pose, that's because I don't feel like am confident in whatever answer I put out there. I would go with the East. Just because I think with the Padres, there's so many question marks of it's does Cease or Michael King actually make it out of spring training on their current team? But I think if the Padres, line up the way I see it, I think the Braves are going to win this division. Obviously, I know who's winning the NL West. To where pretty much the reason I posed this question is just because I was thinking in my head, okay, these four teams: Mets, Phillies, D-backs, Padres. Who are the best, two teams from that pocket? And I think it is the D-backs I think will make the playoffs, and then I think Mets, Phillies, and I think Padres are probably the odd team out, but it's tough.
You mentioned this a couple weeks ago, Slade, but do you not think we're due for another 2021 Giants kind of out of nowhere wild card factor?
Well, let's see. If that happens, then it's who fucking knows what's going to happen in this NL wild card race? The NL wild card race is it's going to be better than the American League by far, in my opinion. Just because, again, like the teams we said, with the star power they have, it's going to be pretty good. And toward the Giants, pop. I mean, they're trying to. We went over it, in our first episode with the NOS, but I don't know. In my opinion, again, I think it's going to be Mets and Phillies. I think Phillies are better than the Mets. I think the Mets are probably that last wild card team. But yeah.
Well, we have successfully talked about the Mets and Mets adjacent subjects for 20 minutes. So now we will move on to the Washington Nationals. I think we're going to finish up with the Marlins because I think we all have a lot to say about that organization. The Nationals, now let me ask, were they who you were picking as your mid-level team? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, they're
I think that's generous. But we can talk about them. I mean, they got some young stars on the rise. You talk about Dylan Cruz, C.J. Abrams, if you can clean up the gambling, James Wood. But
literally, the first thing in my notes was keep C.J. Abrams away from the poker tables. It was my first note on the Nationals.
Yeah. I mean, hey, now we all know. We all love our gambling as much as the next guy. But maybe not at 8 in the morning when you got a game. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying stay away always, but clean it up a little bit.
Exactly.
But this roster is not good otherwise, really. I mean, they just signed Paul DeYoung, I think, yesterday. And
Signing that has historically not been great for any team.
Exactly.
Well, it's not a good roster. They've got young pieces that they're trying to build, and that's fine. But it's not going to be pretty again this year.
Yeah, when I said they're a mid team, when I say mid, I'm usually I think like 75, 77 wins, and I think that's probably where they'll end up at. I think they've signed or either they've acquired some guys that have raised their floor, like Nathaniel Lowe at first base. Josh Bell's their DH again. Um, I do like Luis Garcia Jr. I think he's one of the most more underrated second basemen in baseball. CJ Abrams early on in the season last year was very good, but then kind of regressed back into just a bad defensive shortstop that occasionally can hit the ball.
He's so weird. He's
too
athletic to be that bad of a defender.
Yeah, I really don't, because that's the when I watch CJ Abrams, I don't think he's a bad defender. But when you look at the analytics, he literally is the worst defensive shortstop in baseball. I think I wrote down somewhere probably that. Yeah, he's bomb first percent in defense, and part is just because he has no range. I think he was the worst shortstop in baseball when it came to range. I think that's kind of the reason. We see he'll go to his left, and make a play that looks hard, and you're like, okay, he's a good defender, but for most other shortstops, it's probably because they skip to that ball easily. I think that's the way the analytics look at it. But yeah, and then again, there's Dylan Cruz, who's this. There's Dylan Cruz. There's James Wood. There's fun young players on this team, and they've raised their floor a little bit with these veteran guys, like I said. But they're just mid at the end of the day.
I agree. I try to break down my notes for these teams and things to look forward to and struggles, but this team is just kind of bad, so they really don't have a lot to look forward to. I mean, you're going to be better than the Marlins, but I think my JV high school team from 9th grade was probably better than the Marlins. I think this is an interesting time in baseball where I personally think we could see 200 lost teams in the same division. I think this could easily trend to be a 60-win team if they don't get on top of it early enough. You guys mentioned CJ Abrams. Personally, I think they're just kind of waiting on that guy to be too old to play short, and so he can just be a designated hitter. Because I don't know why they haven't moved him there already and tried to source in something. But I mean, honestly, if I'm a Nationals fan, I'm waiting on an upturn in the front office. I'm just waiting on something to kind of shake up the dynamic and shake up the chemistry. Washington sports really just not a great time in history to be a fan of them. I mean, it just hasn't worked out in quite a while. I mean, 2019 was really good, but that team is long gone by now. I mean, they are consistently they for the past 2 or 3 years have been the worst team defensively in the MLB. CJ Abrams or not, I mean, this team is horrible in the field. If a ball is hit, it's scary. And I mean, there's just really not much to say. It seems like their goal is to, maybe shock some people, win some games they shouldn't, and then ride off into the sunset and hope to develop whatever you have in your farm system. I don't even know what they have in their farm system. This organization has really just kind of backslidden since 2019. And it sucks to see because I mean they had for 5 or 6 years just kept every year having competitive teams. And now for them to barely field anything kind of sucks. I mean, they're just not good. I don't know. Them and the Marlins, I just really couldn't find anything interesting to talk about because they're just so underperforming, so under par, game in, game out, that I don't know what you look for. I really don't have any idea what they could hang their hat on and say this is going to push us over the hump because they have nothing. They have nothing on their roster that could take them anywhere. Honestly, they've got to rebuild. It has to start somewhere.
Yeah. And I would say they are in somewhat of a stagnant rebuild, and you're really relying on some young studs in Dylan Cruz and even Brady House. But the biggest question with these young guys is how fast can they develop? You know, and it's just a team that, like I said, they're kind of starting to embrace a rebuild, but they do need a few more pieces to start to go uphill. And maybe by the time of 2030, they can be a playoff team, but not anytime soon are they looking to do anything like that. I mean, my prediction is that they'll end up 70, 75 wins at most.
Yeah, if you want to look at the Nationals in a positive light as a Nats fan, it is just like you're hoping this young outfield of Dylan Cruz and right, Jacob Young in center, and James Wood in left, mainly Cruz and Wood in the corners. You want them to pop and be the superstars that you're hoping that they have the potential to be, or at the very least, just very good players. And just build around that outfield. And then you're hoping like Mackenzie Gore finally last year started to look more like the like it felt like we've been talking about Mackenzie Gore as like a top like pitching prospect really since I can't remember, probably all the way back in like 2018, to where he finally looked like a pretty solid starter. But then besides that, there's no one else like on the pitching side that's like even remotely exciting. It really is just those young outfield guys. You're hoping they work well, and then off of that, you're hoping next season you go and do something in free agency, and then you're maybe getting to 80 wins. But yeah, the Nationals are just like Pat said, just in a stagnant kind of rebuild. Seems like.
Yeah, I didn't even care to talk about the pitching because, like you said, besides Gore, there's not a whole lot. I will point out that on MLB.com, when you go to like the team's depth chart, they've only got 5 guys listed out of the bullpen, which is crazy because obviously that's not enough. So we'll see who gets called up from Double A to have their crack at it. I will say, I think for me personally, this team is going to be fun to watch in a non-traditional way. I think it'll be fun to check out some games and see how the young guys are doing, like Garcia, Wood, and Cruz. And then also kind of fun to just watch out for who are the veterans here that are going to revive their career and get traded at the deadline to a contender, because that's what this team is too. It's an opportunity for guys to get playing time and try to revive their career. So like Ahmed Rosario, Bell and Lowe over at first, Yepez and Young, because I'm a Cardinals fan. They're going to get opportunities to play because who else are going to throw out there? So which one of these guys maybe has a good season and gets to play on a contender in the postseason? So that's something to look out for.
Oh yeah, sorry. I honestly will say I think if CJ Abrams comes out and like shows anything, I think the Nationals are probably just ready to cut ties with him, and there probably will be another team that's willing to take a shot on a former top prospect like him and see if they can get more out of him. But I think the Nationals, and I mean maybe the poker table is part of it, but I do think it's just the Nationals have seen everything out of CJ Abrams, and if they want to get to actually like get this rebuild really going, shortstop's probably a place where they need to move off CJ Abrams and look to get a bona fide good player there rather than just this guy who's up and down and has all these issues.
Yeah, it's a put up or shut up time for him, certainly, I think.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we've covered every team in the NL East except the last one, the perennial bottom feeder. One of the jokes of Major League Baseball, the Miami Marlins. Mr. Slade, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, this segment on the Marlins, we're not going to talk. There's nothing to really talk about this roster. I mean, if you want to get excited about Xavier Edwards at shortstop, go ahead. But he's a 3-win player, and he is literally the only guy. And even Sandy Alcantara probably going to get traded if he does anything this season for the Marlins. From that again, when we look at the Marlins, might be just. We talked about the Rockies in the first episode and how they're one of the most poorly ran organizations in baseball. The Marlins are the only one that are even in the same ballpark as the Rockies, and might even be somehow just fucking worse. Derek Jeter's tenure with the Marlins honestly needs to be studied and investigated for just absolutely fucking over a baseball team as hard as possible. When you look at the Marlins trades during this era when Jeter was there, obviously you have like Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees. They just signed into that mega deal. They got nothing for him. The guys they got back, again, I'm going to go through pretty much all the names that the Marlins have gotten back in these big trades, and it's laughable. They got back for Giancarlo Stanton. Giancarlo fucking Stanton at that time with the Marlins. They got Starlin Castro, Jorge Guzman, and Jose Devers. I don't know who the fuck these guys are. And then it gets worse. That's probably not even the worst one, because at least you got Starlin Castro, who like played in the field at some
a
point.
Major League Baseball player.
Yeah. Then you have Yelich to the Brewers. For Lewis Brinson, didn't do anything. Isan Diaz, no idea.
He plays in the Mexican League now.
Yeah. And then the most hilarious one is Monty Harrison, who is now 29 years old and is playing fucking football for the Arkansas Razorbacks as a receiver.
Hey, woo pig, baby.
That's the guy. And then Jordan Yamamoto, who no idea what he ever did.
He did make it to the majors, but sucked.
Yeah. And then D. Gordon, they traded to the Mariners. I don't even remember what they gave up for D. Gordon, and it must have been fucking nothing. The fact that I don't remember that. So they got nothing for D. Gordon. The Cardinals stray that is going to come here, the only deal they ever won at this time was the Ozuna trade.
Mm-hmm.
When they got Zach Allen and Sandy Alcantara.
They still fucked that one up, though, because they traded Zach Allen.
They trade Zach Allen for Jazz Chisholm, who in typical fucking Marlins fashion finds his way back to the Yankees now. And I don't even know what I don't even remember what the Marlins got for Jazz Chisholm, but it's probably going to be fucking nothing at the end of the day. This is one of the most incompetent. And even again, they got Sandy Alcantara. It's like, cool, you had that one really cool like Cy Young season from Sandy Alcantara. Guess what? If he comes out and has 3 good starts to start the year, the Marlins are going to trade him as soon as possible. This team is just... Again, they had Kim A, who seemed somewhat it was the first somewhat competent person it seemed like had been around the Marlins in forever, and they forced her out.
Derek Jeter then said, "Fuck progression,"
and just forced her out when she actually took this garbage heap of a franchise to a playoff appearance, and now she's out, and now this team has no future, no players to look forward to. A mediocre ballpark, a fan base that's non-existent. They're truly just there because they're in Miami. It's honestly sad for baseball what's happening in Miami, because it is just so bad. There is no Colorado Rockies. Like in our first episode, I was like, well, Brendan Doyle's kind of cool, and then you have Tovar, and Coors Field's kind of cool. So they suck, but it's they can do something. The Marlins, there's literally nothing to be happy about.
So this is where I'll start, right? Since I've been alive, I was born on October 27th, 2000, at 10:31 p.m. In my lifetime, they have had as many brand / uniform and logo combos as they have had playoff appearances. They won the World Series in 2003. They made the playoffs in 2020 when everybody made the playoffs, essentially. And then they made the playoffs again in 2023. They also used to be the Florida Marlins with the teal. Then they they didn't move. They just branded themselves as Miami, moved ballparks, and were black and orange. And now they are black and light blue with a little bit of pink. I've had as many rebrands as they have had playoff appearances in my life. And you just look through the history of the guys that they've had, and they could have been a powerhouse. I mean, they had 2 MVPs in the outfield, and at the time, Marcell Ozuna was considered up towards that level, just so happened to shit the bed as soon as we got him. They've had, Jazz Chisholm's a good player. They traded him. They've had good pitching that they've traded. Jose Fernandez passed away for doing cocaine on a boat before he got the opportunity to be traded.
Yeah, but we're like on that note, like if Jose Fernandez didn't die, this Marlins team probably would have had a pretty good run in the 2010s. I mean, that's obviously kind of out of their control, but still, like it's so sad what happened to like that core that should have been pretty good. That just they got nothing.
Yeah, it's just like they are in Miami, like one of the top sports markets in the world. I mean, how do you? I mean, you just they can't put people in seats for a sporting event in Miami, Florida.
And we've
Like
seen it like when the World Baseball Classic goes down there and you have Dominican USA, it is one of the most electric baseball atmospheres ever. Like it is electric down there. They got like the Vuvuzelas and all this shit going on. Like
it's literally it's Miami. It is
yeah,
Miami, Florida, United States, and they can't. And yet they act like they are in fucking Columbus, Ohio, and can't spend money. And it's like it. I just can't understand it because it's been different ownership groups. It's been different front offices. The same thing. They win the World Series in 2003. They blow it up. You remember Miguel Cabrera was one of the greatest hitters of our generation. Was with the Marlins. Then they just didn't care. They got rid of him. Win the World Series 2003. They blow it up. They have two MVPs on the roster, an MVP and a future MVP in Yelich and Stanton. They blow it up. They made the playoffs in 2020 and in 2023. They have Jazz Chisholm and some good pitching pieces they could maybe build around. They blow it up. Why? They just feel like it. They don't want to spend money, even though it is Miami. And if they spend a little bit of money, then you get people in the ballpark in Miami, a big market. Then you have more money to spend. All of a sudden, you could have a dynasty if you had any sort of brain. But they just don't. 3 playoff appearances in my entire lifetime, and after each of them, they have blown it up.
Yeah, it is really crazy, and I like how you mentioned that they've tried rebranding so many times, and usually that's an indication that a team is trying to rebuild for a new era. And I feel like they try to do the same thing every few years where they start to build up a good core and then they make a terrible trade and then they're start at rock bottom. Like I feel like it's the same shit every few years where like right now they're trying to embrace another rebuild. And trading away Luzardo and Berger, you're gonna rely on the young core again. Like and then a few years from now, what's going to happen? Same thing. So, I mean, I don't have a ton of notes on the Marlins other than that. Do have a solid pitching rotation led by Alcantara, as he said, and Perez, but I don't know. I just don't have a ton to say about the Marlins.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Marlins fan, I'm sorry, but also this is a good season to find another team to root for. Um, Derek Jeter, say what you will, Derek Jeter couldn't even save this team, and I wouldn't even say that we're the state of the Marlins right now.
Like not save him, he fucked them over.
I don't even think it's entirely Derek Jeter's fault. I think you can only put so many pieces of duct tape on a sinking ship, and he may have made.
He also ripped off a piece of duct tape when
he did.
Came in.
I'm not saying he was the next George Steinbrenner. But I am saying that you can only do so much. They keep getting rid of the team. Like I tried to find notes for this. Dude, I don't know who's on the team and who's not. Like everybody I found, I was like, oh, I'll talk about him. He's not there anymore.
This roster is just failed prospects, whether from the Marlins or from other teams. It's like what the A's did a couple years ago when they had like Blade and Pache and like it's just and Langelier, like it's just failed prospects. Like Ryan Weathers used to be a big prospect with the Padres, got too fat and sucks now. So he's gonna probably be their like 2 or 3 starter this year.
Well, it just feels like they don't want good baseball players.
Jonah Bride is gonna play for Jonah Bride and Matt Mervis are gonna play first base.
I don't know who that is.
Baseball, exactly. Otto Lopez. It's Connor Norby maybe could be somebody, but probably not with this organization. Xavier Edwards, we'll see. He's older than I am.
Xavier Edwards is the only name you've said that I know, and I don't.
He's
know.
the only name worth a fuck, to be honest.
Yeah, like Kyle Stowers. of all of the white boys that played good for the Orioles, he didn't, so they sent him away, and now he's going to play for Griffin Conine, who is just a pure nostalgia stunt. This guy probably shouldn't play above Double A, but his dad used to play for the Marlins, so he's going to also.
Like the Marlins, if you're, God bless you, one of the Marlins fans that's just stuck on with this team, let's see, like, why would you sit through another rebuild? Like, it's not going to come. Like, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You're literally just running straight flat into like a brick wall at the end. That this team, like, again, like we talk about, again, there's Alcantara, who, yeah, but if he does well, he's getting traded. Ryan Weathers used to be good for the Padres. If he plays well, he's out. Cal Quantrill is only there because they're hoping they get like a couple good starts out of him to start the year, and then they trade him to a team that had an injury at starting pitching. Um, there's Max Meyer in the rotation. I mean, maybe you kind of care about him, but like there is just no light at the end of the tunnel here. This is just a sad franchise that should have a way better fan base. And like Pat talked about with the jerseys, they keep changing jerseys just to drive interest. They ripped off the Miami Vice theme just to try and sell jerseys and try and get people to be somewhat excited about this team, and it just hasn't happened.
I just can't stop looking at this roster and trying to think of if I've ever heard of these people. It's shout out Eric Wagaman. Good for him. He's going to play Major League Baseball this year, man.
Yeah, that's honestly the most.
Tell that story forever.
The most productive thing this Marlins team will probably do is they might provide some of those like slideshow guys where they'll be like Eric Wagaman hit a home run in Major League Baseball at one point.
I mean, Immaculate Grid's going to go crazy.
I love those.
Exactly. Like that's really all this team is going to do probably. Like there's no like.
Hey, the Razorbacks got a decent wide receiver. I mean,
Monty
he's not bad.
Eat shit, man. Lewis Brinson is so bad. Oh my god.
The crazy thing about Monte Harrison playing college football now is he's playing I guarantee you, in game 1 in Fayetteville, he played in front of more fans than he did at any time combined in Major League Baseball.
And the crazy thing is that's not even exactly. That legitimately is. We might have to do the math on that. We might have to dive into that. Like that is. Again, I remember being at the Arizona Fall League, and Lewis Brinson and Monte Harrison were both there at the same time. So this, would have been probably 2018, I think. I remember, again, people were talking about, like, the Marlins actually had a decent farm system, and people were talking about the Marlins, that they were actually going to do something coming off these trades that they made, and we all know what, like, they had one playoff appearance, they had 2 sad playoff appearances.
I mean, 2020 just doesn't count. Really?
Yeah, and then even like 2023, they went in and they got smacked by the Phillies, and then they went home.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't even like, I don't know. It really is just pathetic.
Well, let's keep the negativity going, shall we? The patented, soon to be trademarked one day maybe, pack your bag segment. Keeping the negative rolling. Nobody even worth putting on pack your bags on the Marlins. That's kind of sad as I look at this list. They're not even worth that. Sorry, Eric Wagaman. Eric Wagaman might be my new favorite player of all time. I swear, I will keep
getting a Wagaman jersey.
Yeah.
Can we get Eric Wagaman on the podcast now?
Maybe we can. We'll do our best. I'll send an email out to his agent or something. But going with the pack your bags, let's start with Slater, because the player that he had picked, I for a moment was like, I was going to consider him for my stay hot player, because like in my mind I was like, oh yeah, he's a good young catcher. And then I looked up his stats and things like that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, no, never mind.
Yeah, it's deceptive. Like I remember he had a home run against him. Like you see Kyber Ruiz every once in a while, and you just remember the top prospect, and you see the video of him like pulling a home run, and you're like, okay, like. Here it is. Like, Kyber Ruiz is actually a major league catcher. But he quite literally is bad at everything. Like, when you actually look at the numbers, he is bottom 5%. He's bottom 5% in overall batting run value, average exit velo, hard hit percentage, bad speed, chase percentage, walk percentage. He is just his fielding run value. Like you hear all those, and you're like, okay, hopefully he's good behind the plate. No, field run value, he's in the bottom 13%. Literally, the only thing that he does well is he doesn't strike out a whole lot. He is like 98th percentile in that.
No, he just pops out.
Yeah, and then he also is shockingly like 52nd percentile in base running value. So yeah, he can't do shit, but he can not strike out and he can kind of run the bases for a catcher. So like that's literally like all he does. Like everything else is just bad for Kyber Ruiz. We've like just another failed like. I can't believe the Dodgers. Like he was one of the headliners for that Dodgers trade. Like they got Scherzer and Trey Turner in.
That's like what I like. You know, I almost want to like bring it to is my like theory that the league and the media just sucks the Dodgers cocks all the time and pretends like all their top prospects are the top prospects in baseball without doing any research on it. It happens all the time. I mean, Cartaya that just got DFA'd by the Dodgers. He was supposed to be the best catching prospect in baseball. I think Ruiz is probably just one of those. Oh, this guy's in the Dodgers system. The Dodgers. We're going to say he's going to be really good. And so, like you said, the Nationals are like, oh, okay, we'll give you Max Scherzer and Trey Turner for a playoff run. And we'll be fine with Kyber Ruiz because they say he'll be good. And he's just not.
Yeah, like it just again, it's just like when you looked at like all the percentiles on like just the underlying numbers on there really was just like nothing to be excited about.
A lot of blue on Baseball Savant.
It literally was everything besides him not striking out and running the bases. And that's the thing, he can find his way around the bases well, but like it's getting to the point he's gonna have to he's gonna have to find his way to fucking Rochester at this point because he can't do anything else, and he's just not a major league catcher. That's really all I have to say about him. Yeah.
Any thoughts from the peanut gallery?
No, I mean go ahead.
Catching prospects, like I don't know. I don't know the last time I got excited about a catching prospect. I don't know the last catching prospect that I remember people talking about, honestly. Every year there's just somebody that people say, yeah, they'll be all right, and then they usually aren't for some reason. I don't know.
It really is
he's just going to be another one of those guys,
I feel like it's like equivalent to like the quarterback position in football in the sense that like every team needs a catcher, every team needs a good catcher in theory, but there's just not 30 ones that are good. So you just got teams that just have to deal,
Honestly, I think it's a great comp because it's almost like a quarterback too. It's like when you're so desperate for one, you're almost like talking yourself into them. Like if you're like an NFL team and you're and you need a quarterback right now, you're probably watching Jackson Dart highlights and just like ignoring all the red flags.
People are doing that.
Do you guys remember? It's like Gardner Minshew was there. People were talking about Gardner Minshew in terms of like, where is he an elite NFL quarterback? Nobody ever at any point believed Gardner Minshew was going to be good. They just needed to maybe convince themselves he would be.
Yeah, to where I think it's literally the same thing with catchers that we just talk like. You want a catcher to be good. You want to have like that cornerstone catcher that you see guys like these great franchises like the Giants with Buster Posey, the Cardinals with Yair Molina, the Yankees with Jorge Posada, and all these teams. You want that if you want
Cubs
to.
With Giovanni Soto. Shout out, Pat.
Classic. I love that. Great point.
Fun fact: when I went to Wrigley Field the first time, I got a ball at BP thrown to me from Giovanni Soto.
I fucking love that.
But I was always a big Giovanni Soto guy.
Too bad he was painfully average for a long time.
Yeah.
But hey, like we just laid it out there. Sometimes being painfully average is actually above average for MLB catchers.
Exactly. So. Like the Nationals wish Kyber Ruiz would be Giovanni Soto.
Well, moving from one catcher that might have to pack his bag, let's move on to another Pats. Sean Murphy. You're not a fan, huh?
I do like Sean Murphy, and he's a likable guy. had a really good 2023 season in 119 games, had a 251 batting average, 21 home runs, and a 130 WRC plus. So really good numbers from him, and he was looking like a good all-star for the team. And then opening day 2024, very unfortunate situation. Suffered a strained, I think it was his left oblique, sidelined him until May, and then upon return, just couldn't figure it out. However, I think he did get enough plate appearances to have a chance to figure it out. He had 264 plate appearances in 72 games, posed a 193 batting average, still had 10 home runs, but a 78 WRC plus. And so the biggest challenges going into 2025, I think, with him is just that injury recovery, especially with an oblique strain. Baseball is such a rotational sport, and with that, he's not a super young guy. He's 30 years old. That's just a tough, like I said, in a rotational sport, a tough injury to come back from. And he'll have a lot more playing time, especially with the departure of fellow catcher Travis d'Arnaud. So his workload is a lot heavier this year. So I'm just curious how consistent he will be.
Honestly, Sean Murphy is a really interesting one. And it's like Pat said, it's because of the injury history, and it's because he's 30, and that catcher is such like a demanding position. And there's also the part of like we talked about how deep the Braves lineup is. He's not a guy that you can give a day off and you're going to put him at DH because there are so many better options on that team for DH to where he's going to play catcher. And if he continues to get banged up, and like Pat said, with the oblique being like baseball is a rotational sport, like he might like if he doesn't pan out and he keeps getting hurt, he might be a guy that would have to pack his bags.
Well,
He is a good ball player.
And where I'm like thinking of it as, like we talked about, like you just said, that Braves lineup is so incredibly deep. We spent a long time talking about that. We talked a lot about how maybe they could use some help with pitching. I think he's kind of a prime candidate for one of these. Like we also just talked about, teams could be catcher needy. You sell what he did in 2023, say he's healthy, get you a good starter or a good reliever, and then just kind of figure out the catcher somewhere else. Because if there's a team in baseball that can afford to like put a nobody at catcher that probably isn't going to hit but at least plays good defense, it's the Braves. They've got plenty of bats.
I agree with that.
So I think that could be a good move for them. Maybe.
Agreed. And that's part of the reason I put him on Pack Your Bags watch, just with the stacked lineup that they already have. Like, they could be fine going with a backup catcher behind him.
So now we will move on from the catcher position to their counterpart, their battery mates, the pitcher position. And I'm going to go with Frankie Montas, who is already headed to the IL. Shocker. That's what he does best. And he's just like, we talked about it earlier. We hashed it out with the Mets and how uninspiring that rotation is, especially past Minaya and Senga, who have their own question marks. And so they bring in Frankie Montas, and I just don't know how it keeps happening. Teams keep bringing in Frankie Montas to like steady the rotation, and it doesn't work. He just had his run through the NL Central with the Reds, and then Milwaukee, where they both like oh yeah, he's gonna like really anchor down this rotation. Doesn't have to be the one guy. He can just be like a 3. The point of like a good 3-starter that anchors down your rotation is that they pitch a lot, and Frankie Montas just doesn't. He has one time in his career pitched above 150.2 innings. One time, and it was still less than 200. It was only 187 innings. And then they're also just not always good innings when he does pitch. Like, I just think he's average at best. And he's been pretty below average for the last couple of years. Like, 2024 was really bad. 2022 was really good with the Oakland, and then really, really bad with New York. Really, ever since he's left Oakland, he's been pretty below average, but teams just keep signing him. despite not being good and not being healthy. And I just don't know why.
Well, that's like Severino. Like it's almost similar to what we talked about with like the catcher. That like there's some like such a need in Major League Baseball for these competing teams for like that depth starter with like high end upside. And Montas is like people remember Montas from like 2019 and like 2021 with the A's and how good he was like when he was healthy. And I think they're just chasing that and trying to get as close to that as possible out of him. But I think with the shoulder injuries, with all the arm injuries, he's just probably not that guy anymore, and he's not going to hold up. And it is sad. It is sad because Frankie Montas with the A's was a legitimate like one or two like pitcher. Um, but now when you look at his baseball savant, it's just a lot of blue. It's the underlying numbers aren't even good when he is out there, and the main issue is he's not out there that often anymore.
Yeah, it's his 10th year in the MLB, and so he's getting older. He's 31, and I just feel like there's a lot of similar pitchers that we've seen before where they look good in their first few years with a certain team, and then they go to some other squad and can't really make an adjustment, and then they're just kind of simmer out.
Well, I think it shows you kind of the state of pitching right now that he is the marquee guy on a lot of these trades, and a lot of these teams are really touting the fact that, hey, we, like almost every other team, just traded for Frankie Montas. Let's give him 3 months to suck here. You know, I just like maybe it's just because there's no pitching available and that all the pitching prospects are already clambered up, but I just don't see why he keeps getting the chances that he does, and maybe not the chances that he does, but the level of hype around those opportunities makes no sense to me. Because, like you guys have said, he's only been good once, maybe, and then every other time it's we have him until he's hurt, and then he will go play somewhere else for a couple of years. I mean, he's just one of those guys that's going to, in a way.
This is his 5th team in 3 years.
Yeah, and the shocking thing is that like he still keeps getting paid. He's signed a 2-year, $34 million deal. Yeah. He's getting paid $17 million this year.
He still either gets paid or teams trade prospects for him. Like,
yeah,
I just don't get it.
Yeah, he's one of those guys too. Like when it's his bump day, you hope that like if he's on your team, you hope the offense shows up. Otherwise, you don't know what you're gonna get from him. You know.
Exactly.
I remember when he got traded to the Yankees because that was the season, I believe, where the Cardinals got Montgomery and from the Yankees, and they went and got Montas. And then each of those, their first start was against each other. So the first start for the Cardinals was against the Yankees for Montgomery, and we were facing Montas. And Montas just shit the bed. I don't think he made it.
I remember that.
I don't think he made it to the 5th inning.
He got 3 2/3.
And ever since then, that's like been the downhill fall. So, all right, well, let's wrap up the Pack Your Bags segment and send it to the rant man, Mr. Austin Stokes. Who you got?
So this might be not as popular as a pick for this one. I think Aaron Nola is on the Pack Your Bags watch. He had the 7th highest ERA in the NL East last year. He had the highest ERA of a player to be brought back this season. Last year, we saw the 2nd highest earned runs that he's ever allowed in his career. He could not perform well in big games. He could not perform well against teams in the division. So I just don't see the pros of keeping him around and keeping him in the big spots that they're putting him in. He just in big situations where he needed to be that big time arm for the Phillies, he wasn't. And he just, it never really felt like he filled out into that role, you know. And I just, especially in their bigger games and their bigger series later in the season, he just looked like shit, if we're being honest. He didn't really impress me. I just don't remember a game from him against a big team or maybe a division rival or really anything where he just was their standout performer. In fact, a lot of in a lot of the bigger games that they played, against teams, whether it be in the division or not, they had to rely on the offense kind of bailing him out of trouble. And that seemed to be the situation he got in a lot last year. And so I just don't really see him as that serviceable of a pitcher. And I don't really think he should be that high up in the rotation, especially where they're putting him or where they had him last year and where I'm sure they're going to throw him this year. I just think there's better options out there, and you could use his success that he has had to trade for younger players who maybe are going to be a little better. Now, did we just finish talking about how pitching prospects are kind of rare? Yes. Do I think there are players you could get for him? Absolutely. I think you could really build by getting rid of him and maybe by dropping some of the weight. Especially, money-wise, I just don't really think he's going to be that big of a piece for their success this year. And he's a guy that I think you should get rid of at the trade deadline for somebody better.
All right, so let me get this straight. Last episode, you had Nestor Cortez as a stay hot candidate, and this week you have Aaron Nola as a pack your bags candidate.
There's an obvious difference there. One difference is I liked watching Nestor Cortez, and the other is that Aaron Nola plays for the Phillies.
Well, there's another difference. Aaron Nola is good, and Nestor Cortez is ass.
I don't know. I mean, if I'm looking at the numbers, and I have never been one to be the numbers don't lie. I'm always one on trusting guys with whatever I think my eye for the game is. He wasn't good. He wasn't good in big games. He wasn't good in quality in times where he needed to be against big teams. He got rattled a lot, man.
Yeah, I don't agree with Aaron Nola being on Pack Your Bags watch. What I will say is Aaron Nola probably is getting to the point, I think, eventually where he is going to have to retool kind of what he does. Mainly the fastball just really isn't getting a ton of value from him. He's probably a guy I think that is going to go... I think pretty soon you'll see him really lean into more of a sinker cutter. He gets a lot of value out of his curveball. He actually, usage percentage-wise, he throws his curveball 33% of the time. That's the most pitch he throws. But right behind it, he throws his four seam 28% of the time, and then the sinker 20% of the time. I think you'll see a lot more. I don't know if it is this offseason. I don't know what Aaron Nola is doing in the offseason or working on. But I assume it probably would be eventually he's going to go sinker cutter, really going to lean into that curveball. And that's going to be what he is going to be as he gets older. He isn't the ace I think he once was and that he got the big contract for. But I think he still will be a good starting pitcher.
I don't know that I see him being a good number. I think he would be great in the lower half of your rotation and as maybe, your 4, maybe.
I think he is a 3, and then once he gets, we'll see. I think he is right now he's a good 3. I don't know if he a lot of times when we look at the Phillies rotation, I think even I probably said this episode, we go Wheeler then Nola. I think eventually with the Phillies rotation the way it is, the Phillies are going to want to have someone else to headline with Wheeler because I don't think Wheeler or Nola is that top notch guy that we saw really recently. I think he is going to. I think Nola's very good, a very good pitcher, but I think he is probably gonna have to retool pretty soon here.
Yeah, I think a good number 2 candidate would be Luzardo.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Lazard definitely has the upside that we've really seen if he can stay healthy.
Listen, I think you can certainly flirt with the idea that in a couple of years with that contract, it's time. I just don't think it's. I think it's a little early to say pack your bags with him.
Yeah,
that's all. Maybe this podcast will still be going 2 or 3 years down the road, and I won't shit on you for that take anymore.
I will say, honestly, if Aaron Nola is packing his bags this year, I'd be fucked. We'd have to have a full episode praising Austin because that'd be one of the most just out of the blue things I would ever see happen.
Well, if you're a fan of Austin Stokes, you can pray for that to happen.
I'm sure many are.
All All right, so as usual, it's now time, after all that negativity, to end on a more positive note with the Stay Hot Watch, a breakout player, a guy you think is going to continue to be good this year, whichever. And Pat's on a time constraint for us, so we're going to send it over to him first.
Yep. So I'll be pretty quick. I got to depart here for work pretty soon. But my Stay Hot Watch comes from the versatile switch hitting catcher who is young and has much upside, in my opinion, at 25 years old, and that's Rafael Marchand. And didn't get a ton of playing time in 2024 behind JT Realmuto, but in 17 games and 56 plate appearances, he posed a 294 batting average and a 146 WRC plus. So in 2025, he'll most likely have the backup catcher job behind Realmuto. But after 2025, he will be a free agent. And so I think this is a guy who could add great value to a team who needs a catcher in 2026 and beyond. And I think he can be, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, kind of the catcher face of a franchise for a team. Or the Phillies could re-sign him and face the music of a mid-30s JT Realmuto, as well as an aging core. And I think this is a guy who has the potential to be the face of the future of this franchise.
Yeah, I agree because I won't lie. You stole that pick from me. I went to put him in for my stay out player and saw that you already had. Because I agree. JT Realmuto is still really good, but he's older, and I think this year it's going to be kind of like a Wilson Contreras, Ivan Herrera situation last year with the Cardinals, where it was a little different because Contreras ended up getting hurt a couple times. But I just think Marchand's going to play a lot more this year, even though he will technically be the backup. I think he's going to get plenty of at-bats for them, or at least he should if they do things the right way. And with Realmuto's age. And then they have the decision. I think we'll see. JT Realmuto could have a really, really good season this year, but I think it'd probably be smarter to, heading into 2026, if Marchand shows what he needs to this year, probably hand him the reins. I think, like we've been talking about, they're just rare to come by. Good catchers that can hit and field decently. Phillies have been lucky to have Realmuto, who does that, and if they could transition into another one, it'd be like the Packers transitioning from Hall of Fame quarterback to Hall of Fame quarterback to Hall of Fame quarterback.
Absolutely. Go Packers. Just kidding. Go Bears, baby. All right, that's all I got. I'll let you guys leave you guys to it to finish talking about Marchand. But cheers.
See you, Pat.
Later.
Any thoughts on Marchand from YouTube?
I think, yeah, pretty much you guys hit it on the head. I think he probably is the successor to JT Realmuto, because I think the Phillies have probably noticed Realmuto's kind of sliding back into, in the later years of his contract, he's probably not going to be able to play catcher every day, and I think Marchand is the obvious fit for his successor.
Yeah, you guys have said it all. Not really much for me to add. I totally agree.
All right, so now we'll move on to our next day hot player, and I'm going to go to Stokes here because I find this very interesting. A guy that he kind of was shitting on earlier when we were talking about the Mets is now going to be his stay hot player.
I'm going to say a lot, and I'm going to say some things people might not agree with. What I will say that I feel like can be pretty universally agreed on, he's probably the best, one of, if not the best player of our generation.
Talking about Juan Soto, by the way.
Yeah, Juan Soto, for sure. He's got pieces around him. I think they didn't totally to sell the farm for one guy. They've got a lot of good around him that I think he's going to be able to mend well in that clubhouse. He brought an energy to the Yankees that I really don't think has been there since 2009. In just wanting, a Yankee Stadium home run hasn't gotten that big of a pop in a long time. And so a lot of people have been comparing him to one of my favorite Yankees, saying that he's a lot like A-Rod in his younger days. Soto is not. This is besides the point of him being on Stay Hot Watch. A-Rod in his prime better ball player than Soto in his prime. And I will also, I have no problem saying that prime A-Rod far better than prime Soto.
Prime A-Rod also had some help, allegedly.
You know, here or there. But I think he's got a really good chance to, you know, I am pissed about where he's playing, and I'm really upset about what color uniform he's in. I knew he was going to stay in New York. That was kind of the catch-22 I wasn't ready for, was him to go play on the other side of town. This isn't a World Series caliber team. He alone will not take them to the World Series. I personally do not think he alone took the Yankees to the World Series last year. Played a big part, maybe. Took them there by himself, absolutely not. I don't really think you can shoulder a team like that in baseball.
You know, you're supposed to be talking positive in this segment.
Whatever, dude. Hey, you just got to let me get there. Yeah. But I do still think he is the best player that I've seen in a long time. He's got everything you need. He's a great fielder, great hitter, decent on the bases comparatively. And I mean, he does bring a lot of energy. He brings what I think the Mets are really gonna want. I think they're gonna get a lot of traction this year. I think their expectations are too high, like we talked about earlier, to do anything really big. But I think they're going to shake the waves. They're going to be a problem for a lot bigger teams. And Soto's great. Soto's a fantastic ball player. I mean, look at what he did in the Nationals organization. Look at what he did, you know. I mean, look at what he did last year. You know, look how well he hit the ball there kind of in the dog days of summer when the rest of the lineup sucked ass and were fucking awful. So, you know, I think he's going to be fantastic this year. He's going to be great. He's going to make a shitload more money than I ever will see or think about making in my entire life. Hey, man, if you got the money, pay him. Why not, you know?
Yeah, I will say I hated that he went to the Mets because I hate the Mets and didn't want to give those fans more to brag about. But I do respect him for choosing the Mets only because he said, he's been saying for years that since he was with the Nationals, I don't have any loyalty to any team when I am going to go to free agency and I will sign with the highest bidder. He's been saying that the entire time, and so many times players, you know, like, you know, I'm a basketball fan and I'm a Pacers fan, and, you know, Paul George is a guy that has said, I think, for like 4 different teams in a row now that he wanted to end his career with them, like less than 2 months before being traded, because behind the scenes he requested a trade when he said that publicly. That's just kind of a common thing with athletes. Juan Soto, hey, more power to him. He said the truth. He said, I want money. Somebody give it to me. He took the money. We can argue about if that deal is going to be worth it for the Mets in the long run. But for him, he did what he said he was going to do, and he's going to be really freaking good.
15 years is just such a long time. Like, I get that he is young. He is very young for where he's at in his career. 15 years is just mind-boggling to me to sign a baseball player that
15 years.
Yeah, dude, like I might not make it another 10. So 15 years to still be that's just, there's so much riding on that. And then God forbid in 3 to 4 years he sucks ass and then they can't get out of that contract, and then they pay off Bobby Bonilla to start paying Bobby Bonilla again. You know what I mean? And we're back in the same situation. I'm scared this is going to be another one of those Mets, you know, the miserable Mets, you know what I mean? Like, it's just going to be another one of those deals that they really cash in on. I don't think this is the next, like, Darryl Strawberry or anything like that. Like, this is not going to be the face of New York for 15 years. That's just, it's an incredulous.
Shout out Darryl Strawberry for coming to my high school and just openly talking about how he was doing drugs and fucking whores in the dugout after hitting home runs.
Hey, man.
Trying to act like it's a bad thing.
Yeah, he was very open about it. Yeah,
but what I'll say on like Soto, he is a great player. Stokes like he might be one of the greatest players of our generation. I think he definitely is his argument to be the best hitter of our generation. I mean, he is just an insanely good hitter. He controls the zone insanely well. He's one of the hardest guys to get out. Just a great baseball player. That's really all I have to say about him. it was a very this is a very up and down stay hot watch because it was just Stokes being like, "So's the greatest, but the Mets fucking suck." Like,
Yeah.
Well, because I'm having such an internal battle. Like I keep almost saying something nice about the Mets, and then I have to counter it with once again saying "fuck the New York Mets."
yeah, that's like, you could talk about like how great he was with the Nats and everything like that, and like with the Yankees, and then you went to but like what if in 3 years he's just god awful? Like that's just miserable Mets.
Yeah. Well, we'll stick on conversation for the Mets. We've talked about them a lot, but your player in the Stay Hot Watch, also Slater, is a New York Mets.
Yes, so I have Sean Manaea. I think we all very much saw in the playoffs last year how much Sean Manaea had really changed his delivery and just the benefits he got from it.
I saw it live and in person in the regular season at Busch Stadium on August 5th, and he just shoved. Like that was right when he was starting to get going, getting hot. I mean, he was unhittable.
That's like we know like the potential Sean and I had, all the way with he's back with the A's, the potential he had, but he had just kind of gone to, and we keep shitting on Frankie Montas, but it almost kind of was like Frankie Montas, where people kept like signing him, being like, okay, he'll be our fourth guy, and like on this like playoff contending team. But he wasn't there. But then he just completely revitalized himself. So now he's a legitimate like number one, he's on a playoff team. He probably should be number 2 or number 3. But as of now, for a Mets team that's expected to make the playoffs, he is their number 1. We saw him just absolutely shove against the Dodgers. Literally made Ohtani look foolish at one point, to where it's just a very deceptive arm angle, and the guy just is just getting outs at this point. I think he's going to continue with the success. I think he's just going to be a great pitcher for the Mets.
Yeah, I mean, he's maybe a pretty rare case of a guy, like you said. We shit on Montas a lot, but that's a story as old as time in baseball. Is a pitcher that is good when he's young and then has some injury issues, and that's just is what it is. But with Manaea, like you said, that's kind of seemed like where he was destined to fall, and he's bounced back. So maybe that's hope for the future. And obviously, we're learning more about how arms work, and the arm injuries are becoming less devastating as the years go by. But I mean, he was able to figure something out, and like you said, bounce back to now be really, really good on a playoff team.
And that's what we kind of talked about earlier. We just talked about with Aaron Nola. Guys have to, as they get older and their stuff changes just naturally with age, you have to reinvent yourself at times. And that's what Sean and I did and got success from it. Like I said, like Aaron Nola probably is going to do it at some point. Like whenever I talk about a pitcher reinventing himself, my favorite guy to talk about is always CC Sabathia, where he just got to the point where he wasn't going to blow you by with a fastball anymore. He had to just locate with cutters and be deceptive. And that's how he got, that's the reason CC Sabathia is a Hall of Famer now, first ballot compared to a guy like Felix Hernandez, is because CC Sabathia found the right way to reinvent himself and get those counting stats and continue to be a quality major leaguer, while Felix just kind of wore down and towards the end and couldn't reinvent himself.
I think a lot of it is certain teams just need certain things out of different spots in the rotation, and so for a lot of guys it's really hard to reinvent yourself when you're playing for the same organization. For Sabathia, okay, it was easy for him to reinvent himself going from Milwaukee to New York. Felix never got that chance to start over, and so it felt like he had to fill that same role that everybody wanted King Felix to fill year after year after year, and he was just never given the chance. So I think for a lot of these guys, like Aaron Nola, like we talked about earlier, if he's given the shot, and he will with time, but given the shot to get away from an organization and put on a new uniform and really start over, it's kind of like going to a new school. You're doing the same thing, you're learning the same material, you're just doing it with a different logo around you all day. So he's going to have to just, a lot of these guys just need that separation to reinvent themselves. CC is a great example. I was actually going to talk about that, how he is the perfect example of a guy who says, okay, this isn't working for me anymore. I need career longevity. What can I do? And he did that. A lot of guys just don't get the chance. A lot of guys, their organization is so geared towards them being this type of guy. Some guys stand the test of time. Verlander, for one, has been the same type of pitcher that he was the first day he came into the major leagues. Strasburg was the same way. These guys who play like 10, 15 years, it's because they can do that. Whatever that team drafts you, whatever kind of pitcher you are then, if you hang around, they're going to expect you to be that same pitcher. A lot of organizations, like, they just don't have the space for you to rewrite that. So I just think it's a matter of getting away from the old to get a chance to start up the new in a way.
Well, that's the thing too. I think a lot of times with pitchers too, the issue they have a lot of times with reinventing themselves is admitting to themselves they're not going to get back to what they were. A lot of pitchers, I think Felix was the case here, that thought he would just work and he would get back because that's the thing. A guy like Felix and a guy like CC, when they're coming up, like, they're just absolutely dominating guys. To where it's hard to say, I have to just change what I'm doing completely from what I was doing because I'm not going to get to that point. A lot of guys just think, like, I can get back to that point. Because some guys do. Again, Verlander almost is the perfect example of a guy who just went to the Astros and they put him in their pitching lab and they got him back to where he was. And that doesn't happen. Like Felix, with the wear and tear on his arm, was just never going to get back there. Again, I love Felix. Felix is a Hall of Famer. I'm not trying to shit on him, but he is a good example of a guy who's just so dominant. But then when it started to go south, just couldn't find a way to keep pitching at a high level like CC did, where he went from dominating to realizing he wasn't going to be that guy anymore to completely changing his arsenal.
Well, moving on to my stay hot player. I'm going a little bit different this time around. First two times I went with young catchers that I think will break out, and I was going to do that again, but then Pat had already chosen Rafael Marchand, which is fine. I should have been quicker with that. So I'm going to give a little ode to my buddy Andy Dunham, big Texas Rangers fan, and talk about a guy that's no longer a Texas Ranger. He's been traded to the Washington Nationals, and he's almost 30, so it's, like I said, it's a little different than what I've been going with, but I just think Nathaniel Lowe is one of the more underrated players in baseball, and it's not going to help that he's playing on the Nationals this year, but I think he's a prime candidate to play really well and amongst a just roster of shit. He'll be like a bright, shining light, play pretty well, and then end up on a contender by the deadline. And, he's not going to, he doesn't jump out at you, but he's just consistent. He just hits and he fields. He's got a silver slugger. He's got a gold glove. You look at his baseball savant page, he's 84 percentile in batting run value, 80 in fielding run value. So he's well above average in both of those. His walk percentage is 97th percentile. He gets on base at a high level. He's got good range defensively at first base. I just think he's really, really, really solid, and he just has been undervalued, not just by fans, but it almost seems like by teams too, because and I'll admit, I wasn't really aware of how good he was until my friend Andrew started talking to me about him after he had been traded. He was upset that he'd been traded, and I looked into it, and I'm like, yeah, the Rangers probably shouldn't have traded him. Jake Berger hits for more pop, but I think Nathaniel Lowe is probably the much more valuable player in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, honestly, Nathaniel Lowe was the perfect. When I talked about the Nationals, I think this offseason really looked to raise their floor, and just to see what happens. I think looking towards the future, and Nathaniel Lowe is that guy. He's the guy that you want if you want to raise your floor. Is him, because he's going to go out there. If he's on the field, he's going to be a major league quality first baseman. You're going to get that from him. He's going to provide value to your team. He's not going to be a guy that's probably going to just bottom out and not work out. Compared to a lot of the other guys on the National roster, Abrams could bottom out. But, you're not going to get that with Nathaniel Lowe. He's going to post. He's going to play well. And that provides a lot of value to you.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can really kind of hit it on the head. I think that'll be an addition that they're able to kind of build around going forward into the next couple of years. And it'll be one that I feel like is going to bring kind of a much needed spark back into that fan base. That's a guy who's kind of easy to kind of get around. And has shown that in past organizations. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good place to go from here, to avoid that kind of, like we talked about earlier with the Marlins, that seemingly endless rebuild. That's a really good place to start to kind of to inch your way away from that.
So there you have it. Shout out Andy. Shout out Nathaniel Lowe. Shout out Juan Soto. We didn't talk all that positively about you, but you're a stay hot player. And I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for the NL East and the National League in general. American League is going to be really, really interesting to get to talk about here in the next coming weeks. But the National League is going to be fun to watch too. A lot of the wild card race is going to be really fun. Really, really fun all year long.
Oh yeah, really cannot wait for baseball seasons, the Major League Baseball season to start.
We're just over a month, away from opening day.
Hey man, spring training games start here in a couple of weeks. So I'm just ready for that.
Maybe a couple. I think the Cubs and Dodgers play on the 20th because they gotta leave early for Japan. So that's in 3 days.
But fuck those two teams in particular for me. Anyway. Looking forward to it. Baseball season's here with college baseball. Major League season right around the corner. Stick with us. Going to keep going on this ride, talking baseball as much as we can. Thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts from Stokes or Slater?
It's going to be a fun season. Looking forward to the next episode.
My last thing I will say, shout out to Brandon Compton week 1. Just absolutely went off. Batted 500, had a walk-off double on Saturday. That was just hitting lasers out there. I go through the numbers, but just keep an eye out for Brandon Compton at Arizona State baseball. That's all I'm going to say.
Go Pokes. Went 1-2. But it's going to be a good season. Big 12 is ours. Sorry about it, Slater.
We'll see.
We'll see you next time.